few friends that actually have special needs children. Like some are autistic, some are on the spectrum and things like that. And they tell me a little bit of the challenges and the triumphs that they've experienced. But share your story. Let us know from the very beginning of this journey of you, your family, and your special needs child.
Sure. I love to talk about this because it's been a journey, just like you said. Um, I got married a little bit older and I had my first child a little bit older in my life. I was 38. And, when you have this child and you get pregnant, you find out you're pregnant, you're so excited. You're like, this is going to be great. And we found out it was a boy. And oh my gosh, this is awesome. And then at about 29 weeks, you go into the doctor and they look at you and they go, you got to go to the hospital because something, you have no amniotic fluid and you got to be admitted. So, anyway, it all started with that. And I was in the hospital for 3 weeks. And then he came and we had to do kind of an emergency C-section at 32 weeks. He was only 3 pounds when he was born. And he had to stay in the NICU. So that's kind of how the story began with him. Because he was in the NICU, he was followed by the hospital for many years, for about 2 years after he was born. And the every time we would go in, they would do, milestones, do a few testing, just to make sure that he was progressing, that he was, growing and hitting his milestones. And it got to a point where he was kind of behind. And then it got to a point where they're like, hey, there's something here that you need to kind of watch out for. And so that's when I started searching and trying to figure out, what do I do? How do I do this? And so we ended up with an occupational therapist who helped me get into the state funded program here. And when that happened, it was when we started, okay, there's something here. We really need to start working on this. My son didn't speak until he was about 4 years old. And we actually have a video of him for the first time he said like independently a word, and his word was more. And so we have that on video, and it's probably one of my sweetest, like most cherished videos ever. And his first diagnosis was speech therapy. It was a speech problem, and it was called childhood apraxive speech. And from there, it just kept adding. So he has ADHD, oh, he has this, or he has that. And then it just kept adding on, and we're kind of just putting band-aids here and there. And when he was about, it was probably about 2 years ago, we were finally approved to do a genetic test, and we did that. And because we had done so many other testings before and everything was negative, I was expecting this call that was going to be, everything is negative. It's just what it is. And it wasn't. He had a diagnosis, and it's called TBR1. When he was first diagnosed, there were 60 kids in the world diagnosed with it. Now we actually have about 190 kids. So he's one out of 190 in the world with this diagnosis. And this diagnosis actually was not even tested for until about 3 years ago. And so any kid that had a genetic testing before 3 years ago, they wouldn't have this diagnosis. Anyway, since the diagnosis, nothing has really changed. We just know that there is this genetic disorder. We continue to do the same therapies, we continue to do everything, and he's doing really well. He's 10. He speaks with, it's hard to understand him, but he's doing well. So this is kind of the story. This is how we ended up to talking about this, because I was telling you a little earlier, like I am finally at a point where I feel like, okay, I kind of have this a little bit, So I can probably help the people who have nothing. They just don't even know where to look or what to do. So that's what I'm doing now.
So when you realized that this was going to be your journey, you and your family with your child, was it something that caught you off guard, or is it something that in a way you were maybe a little bit prepared for because you always wanted to be a parent and you kind of were in the state of mind that it doesn't matter what happens, I know that I'm going to make sure that my child is loved and I'm doing the best that I can.
I think that there's a little bit of both. I think that when you find out you're pregnant, you kind of have these expectations, these things in your head, in your mind. I'm going to have this boy, he's going to grow up. My husband, I'm sure he was thinking he's going to be an NBA player or an NFL football player. That's what's going on through his head. And in my mind, I'm like, well, maybe he's going to be a doctor, he's going to be something. You kind of have those expectations for your child. You kind of make that, this life. And when you are hit with obstacles in your life, in his life, then it's hard. And that is probably one of the hardest things that I have ever had to do in my life was to realign and reprogram what I thought life was going to be to what life has actually was actually happening, what was at the time. So I think that if you talk to any special needs parents, I don't think they were ever really expecting something to happen. I think it just comes and we go along with it as they come, and you learn along with your child.
I know some parents when they found out that their child was special needs, they went through two stages from what they described to me. Um, there was some people that felt that maybe there was something that they did that caused this.
Hmm,
Some parents, I know it's strange, right? Some parents
not.
wondered how are we going to um continue forward because now the demands is different. So when I look at both of those scenarios, I look at it as, and when I spoke to them, I asked them the question. I was like, okay, that's pretty interesting because I don't have any children, and that may be true for a lot of parents. They may think, oh, you know what, if I didn't smoke, if I didn't do this, if I lost weight, whatever the case is, right? You begin to maybe guilt yourself into thinking that somehow you caused it, or some other people they'll blame God, right? But in both
Hmm.
scenarios, when I've asked people, I said, don't you think this is a little bit of you projecting onto the child that just needs you in that moment? And it's to me on the outside looking, it's no different than you have a child that is quote unquote not special needs, or what some people call it, that was born healthy. It just seems that sometimes some people have the expectation when a child is born, it's essentially born perfect, and then society kind of makes it imperfect versus no, when a child is born, it's a parent's responsibility to make sure that the child is raised to the best of their ability and they provide the best environment possible for the child. But what are your thoughts on some people who may think that maybe they've done something, or maybe this is not what they necessarily signed up for and they don't know how they're going to proceed further because now the demands are a little bit greater?
So, first of all, for 8 years, I thought that my son had the issues that he had because I ate too much Taco Bell and drank too much Dr. Pepper while I was pregnant with him. I was like, did I do this? Did I not count the kicks correctly? Could I have done anything differently to make sure that this didn't happen to him? And I lived with that for a long time. And I don't think that it's a choice of thinking those things. I think as a mother, you kind of have that, and it's normal to have those thoughts. But for us, for me, when I received the diagnosis, it was like, okay, I didn't do anything. It was when he was formed, his DNA had an issue, right? This little letter on his TBR1 was inverted. So for me, that was a huge stress relief, that a guilt was taken off of my back, right? Now, for parents that get are blessed with these children, and sometimes, and I'm going to tell you, it is a hard thing. It is hard. The amount of work and the amount of effort you need to put into their education, their therapies, the doctors that they're seeing, the bringing a team together, you lose yourself. You really do. And that is a problem that happens with, I'm sure, every single family that has a special needs child. I can understand where some of these parents just can't do it. I see that, and I can see how that would be something. And that's why you see a lot of grandparents actually raising some special needs kids. I've spoken to quite a few of them in the past little while, when I started kind of getting out there and people talking to me about special needs and complex kids, what I like to call them. And there are a lot of grandparents out there that are raising them because the parents just can't do it. And it's an unfortunate thing, but I think that everybody does what they can do, right? It's you can do what you can do with what you have at the time. So,
And that's tough. That is tough. I think there's like this unwritten rule for all parents. Look, from me, the outside looking in, is that when a child is born, when you decide to create one, you will try your best. And there's some parents who their best, unfortunately, isn't good enough. And you hear all these stories, right? Like you hear people, children being born, and we're both old enough to remember, like, they would leave them at the fire station, they'd leave them by the garbage, they'd leave, all these different scary scenarios. And for someone like you and someone, a few of my friends who are discussing this now as we talk, they were products of, they have special needs and they have different conditions. And every day they
mhm.
talk very highly of their parents because their parents made a choice to continue forward and to be there. And when you say things like, complex kids, and you praise them and you speak so highly of your situation, all the work that you've done, Michelle, when you work with these parents, these families, and you see these other kids, how much joy does it bring to you knowing that not only were you there for your own child, but you're there for the children, the families of other people as well?
It's been like probably one of the funnest things I have done in so long. Like, I've been working for the same company for 17 years, doing the same thing over and over again. And right now, I am having such a good time helping these parents because they need the help. They need the help. And everyone that, and this is one of the things that I talk to the parents, right? Unless you are well, your child is not going to be well. And so I try to make sure, and that's one of the biggest points I make, you have to take care of yourself to be able to take care of a child. And when I can get the parent to even take just a couple of deep breaths during the day while they're going through everything that they're going through, just to take a little bit of time for them, it is like celebration time. Because and then it makes me happy. Hey, you took some deep breaths. Congratulations. That's amazing. If you set yourself apart for like 5 minutes and just got a cup of coffee and you sat down, it makes me so happy because then they are going to be able to take care of their children and their complex kids in a much, much better state of mind than you would if you don't take care of yourself. So I celebrate with them. I celebrate with my kid and I celebrate with their kids.
So let me ask you a question. I'm someone who doesn't have children, and hearing your story and people around me who I may not even know are going through something like this, right? Because sometimes it's something that you may keep to yourself, or sometimes you may share it. What is something that I can do as a person without children, but still wants to provide support and perhaps understanding of those who have, as you mentioned, complex kids or children with um, different needs?
Mhm. One of the biggest things somebody that doesn't have a complex child, a complex kid, that they can do is actually really be there for them. Don't isolate them because of their situation, because of their kid. I remember for a long time, we stopped getting invited to certain things. Like we used to go out all the time and we used to, go to friends' houses. And then it kind of stopped once they saw my son and they had to deal with, he was melting down at somebody's house. And then I would have to pick him up and just take him and go home and leave. And the invitations kind of dwindled a little bit. And so as a person who have these friends, don't isolate them. Make sure that you include them and be understanding that, you know what, this is not, they're not doing this to you or against you or because they're not having fun at your party or they're not having fun with you. It's because it happens. It's a different lifestyle. I have navigated the past few years to really have friends who understand me and who are inclusive of me. So for you and for the people who are listening that have these friends, include them. Don't isolate them. Understand that it's not because they are bad parents or because don't judge them because this is not what it's about. It's about they have a complex kid and they're trying to do the best that they can. But they still want to be your friend and they still want to do these things with you. So include them.
What are some of the emotions that you experienced when you began to be isolated and maybe the invites were less frequent and some people maybe put some distance between yourself and them just because you had a child that was experiencing life in the way that complex kids do?
Oh my gosh. You start you start to wonder like what did I do wrong? Like what could I have done differently? And what can I do to make up to them? And how can I make them still like me? And let me tell you something. I have so much more things, like so many more things that I need to worry about. That includes my child, my family, my house, everything else. Please don't do that to me. you know, like don't don't make me feel like that way is kind of what I think. But you really for me, I tried so hard to keep those people, to keep those friends around and then you try to invite them and you try to overdo things in a way. And then it got to a point where you kind of just have to let that go because if they're not trying, you can't do it on your own. It takes two to tango, right? That's the saying.
Human nature is like you want to make it work, and then there comes a point in your life where you realize, wait a minute, this journey that I'm trying to walk when it comes to friendship, I am doing the majority of the work, right? Like you're paving the road, you're building the bridge, and the other person is literally just, well, not literally, but in some cases, just watching you do this hard work. And then after a while, you're like, you know what? I can be taking this time and energy and be putting it into my child, or I can take that time and energy, be putting it into myself to maybe surround myself with people who are more understanding. Because I know,
Mhm.
like with anything in life, you begin to realize that there's some people that as long as your life stays exactly the way it is when we met, we'll be friends forever. But Michelle, you
Yes.
introduced something that's a little bit different.
A
Like,
little
no,
bit. And it's,
sir.
yes, exactly. Oh my gosh. You are so right.
It's crazy, right? Like when you think about it, it's crazy how it's just something that's a little bit different. Like it's not even in the grand scheme of things, it's not significant to at least to us, right? And maybe that's because we're understanding. But if I look at like some of the friendships that have ended along the ways as I became a better man and became a better person, became a better partner, became a better whomever, I realized that you lose people along the way just for that. When you get a different job, you lose friends because of that. When you get a different house, a bigger house, a better car, you lose friends because of that. So maybe that's us simplifying it, but the way we're looking at it, it's just I have a child that needs more of my attention than maybe your child needs of you. Why is that isolating me from other people? And I wonder, and I wish I don't know who, if I could ever interview anyone who feels that way because they probably never admit it on film, right? I, I wonder what causes that, or what do you think maybe causes people to shy away and say, hey, this is too different for me, or this is something that maybe I can't handle in my life at the moment.
I think it's just that they don't know. It's the unknown. That is what it is. The unknown is scary. That is what people deal with. The other thing too is that they don't know how to act and how to react to those things. I my my father-in-law one time, this is just a story. My son was having a complete meltdown. We were at the movie theater and he really wanted to help. So he picked him up and took him out to walk around, and he went out and he said I could not calm him down, and he went into the car and he had to basically lock my son in the car because he did not know what to do. He was kicking, he was screaming, he was doing all these things. And I mean, he this is his grandpa, right? And of course he's looking at this as I got to figure this out. But, for other people who are not invested or not part of the family per se, they would know and they would not try as hard as a family member would. And even family members sometimes don't want to deal with it. But I think it's because they don't know how to react and they don't know what it is and they don't know how to help you. Does that make sense?
Yes, because it maybe points back to my earlier question where maybe there's a lack of education. Not
Mm-hmm.
purposely, right? It's not like they willfully don't want to know. It's if you went 30, 40, 50 years without knowingly coming in contact with someone that has a child that has special needs or a complex child, you're not put in a situation to know. Like how many people go to look it up and say, okay, you know what, I want to reach out to Michelle and learn about this. Some may not, right? Right. And
Mm-hmm.
that brings me to what you're working with when it comes to wisdom for complex kids and the work that you're doing. Like as I review some of the work and visit some of the work that you're doing, how are you bringing what how you bringing this to the forefront and helping these families in a way that can, I don't want to use the word protect them, but make sure that they're having a childhood that is not as conflicted as maybe it may be for some kids.
I think that, so what I'm trying to do is to avoid the mistakes, to help them avoid the mistakes that I made when I first started, right? I made a lot of mistakes, but I did not have anybody to guide me. It was like I was just, it was everywhere. You go here, you go there. I ended up in Connecticut. I for a speech therapist because we didn't have one here that was trained to do what you're just going everywhere and you don't know. So what I'm trying to do is actually give them that vision of, first of all, you got to start early. You have that feeling as soon as you get that gut feeling, and I call it the mama gut. As soon as you get that, something is going on. If you're questioning, go figure it out. And so I'm trying to point them in the right direction so they can avoid those pitfalls that I made. And also so they can prepare themselves and adjust the thought of that we talked about just a little bit ago. It's my fault. I'm doing it wrong. I'm a bad parent. I did something, because that doesn't help anything. You need to become their best advocate, even if it is just for a little while, and things get better and they're great and there's nothing wrong with them, which is amazing. But if there is something with wrong, or not wrong, but if there's something different about them that you need to treat and then you need to get to, then at least you're starting early. So that is my whole point, is trying to help people see that that beginning and that mama gut feeling is when you act. That is when you take your steps.
One thing I love when you're explaining that is you are very conscious of the type of words that you use when describing this, right?
Mhm.
And I think I was picking on that because even when I was saying some things, I was like, okay, this is a word that would normally be used with good intentions, but it may not be appropriate.
Mhm.
That is something that I have learned speaking to mothers and fathers who are in this situation is the words do matter, right? Like the
Mhm.
everyday words that you use, it's fine and appropriate. Like, if you get a couple of guys together, we speak a certain way, get a couple of women together, they speak a certain way. But sometimes when you're speaking about children like this or parents of children like this, your words do matter, right? You have to be very precise and very specific because you can say something with the best of intentions, but it comes across as demeaning, as belittling, as dismissive. Would you agree with that?
So I have to tell you something. I am not the kind of person that's going to be stuck with the word that you're using. I'm not like that. And in various parts of my life, I'm Brazilian, racial in any way. Like I do not get attached to that stuff. I am telling you. So, and I'm an open book. So to me, I don't take it personally because, first of all, if a person is using that kind of a word, it's probably because they don't know any better, right? So, and that's okay. That's fine. Like, let's teach them, okay? The reason why I use the words is because really it, I mean, is there something wrong with your child? Yes, there is. Like he has a wrong DNA. Like the DNA is wrong in his body. Does it make him a wrong person, a bad person? No, it doesn't. It does not matter. So to me, and this is me, my personal, experience is that I don't know. I guess that I just don't get stuck in those things. But there are a lot of people out there in many other different parts of things out there that hang on to those words. And to me, it just doesn't. I just let things go. People just need to learn, and they will learn. The more you get in front of them, and that's kind of what I'm trying to do, right? Trying to get in front of people. I'm trying to teach them. I'm trying to give them that knowledge, and it will come. It will come. So
You run a mom's group, I believe, on Facebook. Is that correct?
that's correct.
Yes.
I have a Facebook group with moms that have complex kids. So what I do in there is we talk about what have you done for yourself this week? What is something that we need to celebrate for your child? What do you have any questions about IEPs, which is what we use in the school district for individualized educational plan? And like we hold each other accountable. It's a community, and really kind of we're there for each other because we need that as a mom, as a dad, as a family of a complex kid. You need that community because you cannot do it alone. It takes a village. I am telling you, it takes a village.
I will agree that it does take a village. And I think sometimes we forget how important not only is the structure and the love of the home, but outside of it as well. I have there's two friends who they have a mom's group. And I think it's for children under 10 years old. I think both groups are. And it's within their city. So they get together, they do walks together, they'll have lunch together, and they'll bring the kids in and things like that. And when I heard, when I knew that I was going to talk to you, and I was looking it up, and I was like, oh my gosh, she runs a mom's group. So it reminded me of that. I can see like these happy mothers with their children who they're filling with love and they're getting together. It's like you described, right? They're sharing the emotions, they're sharing their stories, they're sharing, okay, this worked for me. Have you thought about this? This didn't work for me. Have you thought about that? And what I truly, truly love, and I think this is missing in general across the board, is we don't have the mentorship, meaning that we don't have people saying that, okay, these are the mistakes I made. This is how you
Mm.
can learn. This is what I learned, and this is possibly how you can grow from them. Is that part of the community as well, where you're sharing not only the good, but some of maybe the indifferent, some of the bad, and saying that this is how I grew from this. So I'm sharing this because we're all in it together. We're all going to share the same superpower.
Of course, that's what it's all about. A community is for that, right? It's not just, hey, let's celebrate, let's be happy, let's do all these things. It's also what I do is I do some trainings. My latest one was on speech therapy. How do you address speech therapy when a child is 3 or 4 and they're not speaking? Where do you go? What kind of therapy is appropriate? And we talk about different things, meltdowns, how to stop a meltdown within 5 seconds, which it's a hard thing to do, but you have certain things that you can do to help that calm down. So I do a lot of those trainings in that mom community because that's what it's all about. We're learning from each other's mistakes. We're learning from each other. This has worked. This has not worked. Do this, try this. If this doesn't work, then it's because sometimes it is trial and error. And that's kind of what community, village, having that village is all about.
You know, I can't let you skip past the meltdowns in 5 seconds solving that. I have people around
Ah,
me. I don't know if they're complex adults, but I can definitely use some tips. Please, Michelle, how do you solve a meltdown in 5 seconds,
I
child
know.
or adult?
So the brain sometimes when a child, and this is not just, somebody who's angry or whatever. This doesn't work for that. When a child is in a true meltdown, and usually this happens with even typical kids, sometimes it happens to them. They just can't turn that off. Their mind is just going and going and going. And they don't know how to turn it off. So there's two things that you can do. One is, and these are things that just kind of go to the brain right away and makes the brain stop and, okay, let me just take a minute here. One is a strong smell. So, like, not a bad one, but lavender or something like a special oils or something like that. If you put it on, like, rub it or just have it around, the brain kind of has to stop because it's so fast to the brain. A smell is so fast that the brain has to stop. Oh, I smell that. So it kind of stops that wiring and that constant meltdown that's happening in their brains. The other thing is the sensitivity, like the cold, holding something cold, giving them a very cold water because it's the same thing. The sensation just goes straight to your brain. This is cold, and I need, so the brain stops. I have been doing that. And this I learned, I cannot take credit for that because I did not come up with that. I actually was on a podcast with these amazing, it's a mom and a son, and they run their business and it's called Mendability. They're amazing. And they talk a lot about the brain and how it works and how it's has to be rewired to help children. Anyway, they were the ones that told me about this, and I have tried, and it has worked. Incredibly enough, the cold worked like a charm. It was great. Here, drink a little bit of cold water. Let's get you in a cold shower. It was like that.
So the cold, okay, I'm taking this down. Cold water and, well, the shower. I can send people home, I guess, for the cold shower. Okay. It's not going to be a party at Terrain's house. Let's rest assured. But I like that. So does that also help them? Because there's also mentioned big emotions. Does that help with that as well when it comes to the meltdown, or are these two things that are separate from each other, but that are not necessarily mutually exclusive?
They are different. The when you're dealing with a meltdown, when you're dealing with a child that just can't, like, the brain is just going in circles, like it's just they just cannot stop the crying and the screaming, and they just don't know how to do that. That is very different than just having a big emotion. I have a daughter, she's 7, and let's talk about emotions. Oh my goodness. She's 7 going on 16, and the emotions are here and there. But those things don't work for her. I mean, you can distract them from certain things, but it's not the same. The ones that I'm talking about are those children that are melting down in the middle of the grocery store on the ground, kicking and screaming, and the parent is doing whatever they can do to calm down the child, and they just can't calm down. That is when you take out that little, you know, lavender smell or whatever it is that you have in your purse if you're prepared, or you just give them like some really cold water or something cold to hold. And usually that helps, at least kind of for a second. The brain has to restart and think about something else.
And then what also may help is that the parent has to remain calm throughout this, right? If the child is having the meltdown, the parents can't respond by having their own meltdown. Is that fair to say?
Oh, yeah. So easy to say that sometimes. It is not, it's one of the hardest things to get to that point as a parent, to not melt down along with your child.
It's funny you say that. I can't remember if it was Instagram or TikTok. I saw a video where the child, I'm guessing, was having a meltdown, but the child was screaming, right? On the ground screaming. And the parent, as odd as this may seem from me looking in, started to scream back. So the child would scream, stop. The parent would scream, stop. And then you have these people just screaming at each other in the store. And everyone is watching two people have this meltdown, competition basically
Who can
with
scream
each
louder?
other. Yeah, who's gonna tire first? Like think about that for a minute, right? So I'm glad that you mentioned the difference because I think that's a big part because if you're dealing with a child that has these different needs or any child actually, you want to be the calm for them because eventually they will pull from the parents' calmness, right?
Mhm. Yeah, you have to be. And I I am guilty of it. I have not always. Sometimes I lose my mind, and that is why it's so helpful that I have my husband with me because sometimes I have to step away and he needs to step in. Sometimes he needs to step away and I have to step in. It is really, truly hard. And I feel for the parents who are single parents, who are with a complex kid and they don't have that what we call respite, right? The time for themselves. And so that to me is probably incredibly hard because you have to compose yourself. And one of the things that I recently found was that when you have a complex kid like this, you end up like probably about 40% of families end up in divorce when you have a special needs or a complex kid or something like that. So there are quite a few parents that end up as single parents dealing with their complex kids on their own.
I was wondering about that. And because you have the moms group and you're working with so many families that have that, and I'm wondering, are the struggles the same for those who have both parents versus those who are single parents? And then you also have a different dynamic, right? Those who are going from a two-parent household to maybe a one-parent household, or maybe even a fourth one, those who are maybe married, but they're solo parent in the household. Do
Mhm.
you see differences between those dynamics of two parents handling it versus one handling it, whether they're single parent or solo parent?
Yes. Oh my gosh. I feel like the ones that are the single parents, they need a lot more help, a lot more support from me. And but I do have to say that it's not just me helping them. They have to help themselves, right? One of the things so I am going to tell you, my husband and I almost got divorced so many times because we really like I spend so much I in the beginning of all this, I spent so much time trying to figure out what was going on with my son. And you kind of leave things behind and you kind of just do things half-assed, right? Like you just, it's not like 100% of you. You already, when you have a child, you already take some of that away from your spouse. When you have a complex child, you even take even more. So it, it is hard. It is hard. And I tell people, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Can you hear that? What I tell them is that we need to, my neighbor, we need to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves in a way that we are healthy. So I have had a therapist for many years that I talk to on a regular basis. We all need that therapist that's helping us. even if it isn't like a psychologist per se or a therapist per se, but even if you have just somebody to talk to, you have to have that. Somebody without that, you can't continue. You need to have the mental health strength to deal with it.
I wonder how many people are missing that piece because it's draining, right? Being a parent in itself is draining. Being a parent with a complex children, I would guess, is even more so. And being a single or solo parent dealing with that is probably even more difficult, right? Because from what you've shared with me today, is that the common theme, at least from my understanding, is that you have to make sure that you have the time, you have the energy, you have the resources to deal with a complex kid because it's going to take quite a bit of that from you. Now, if you're a single parent now and you're trying to make ends meet, for example, right? Let's say you're a single parent, middle class, lower middle class, where are you spending most of your time? Probably at work, trying to make things meet, right? Maybe living paycheck to paycheck, whatever the case is. And now you have this child, now you have a child that is going to demand a little bit more from you each day because of what they're going through. So I totally understand how maybe some parents can be like, Michelle, this is just crazy. My life is so out of control. I just need someone to talk to. And that's where you have to lean on the professionals, you know. I think too often we maybe run to the most convenient but not the most productive person or outlet, and that can make potentially things worse. Do you see sometimes with the women that you work with, when they're seeking out support, they go to the wrong person or area and it actually makes the situation worse?
Oh, yes. Eh, And sometimes it ends up, and this is here I'm coming on, it's talking about social media, which I am on there, and that's where my community is. But there is so much wrong and it's so much wrong information out there for them to look at. And for some reason, they believe that. And it just makes it worse. So, and one thing that I will say when you're talking about going to people, when you are starting out and you have a child, for us, for example, my son was 3 years old and he wasn't talking. He just grunted. It was, that's all he could get out. And I remember people coming to me and going, "Oh, so and so didn't speak until they were 5, but then they spoke very well after that." Or so and so didn't do this until they were 10 years old. And they kind of just put it off. They kind of just tell you, "Hey, don't worry about it. Brush it aside. It's gonna be okay." But the truth of the matter is that it's not going to be okay. It could be. It could be okay, but if you feel like there's something there, there's probably something there. So go look and find out. And if there's not, great, just wait it out. But if there is something, early intervention is the first thing that you have to do. Now, I want to go back to something that you said because I was thinking about it when you were talking and about these single moms or these single parents that have these complex kids and they're working and they're trying to make ends meet. And part of the whole thing that I talk about is learning about your rights and the benefits that you can have through the school districts and through the state programs. A lot of people have no idea of what they can get help with. So the school district, they are responsible for your child's education from when they're 3 years old until they're 18 years old. State funded programs are out there. In California, we have great great programs for special needs, for disabilities. And so it is, but most people don't know what they are and they don't know how to get them. So we talk about those things in my community. I am trying to go out there and talk to people. Hey, did you know that you can get this? Did you know that you can go and ask this to the school district? And those are all things that when you don't know, you don't know.
So will this be like information? Because I know in America is a little bit different than Canada in some regards. So would this be maybe benefits school-wise, state to state, or is this more at the federal level where it's countrywide?
So in the United States, and this is my experience, I'll be honest, I have not looked at outside of the United States, but in the United States, the state funded programs are different. They are still the same. What I mean, under 3 years old, it's state programs will take care of the kids. And then after 18 years old, the state will come back into the picture, but only if they have disability that warrants that 18 and older program. Okay. But in the United States, if a child is between three in the ages of school age from 3 to 18, therapies are provided by the school district. So if they need speech therapy, if they need occupational therapy, physical therapy, it is all provided through the school district. And unfortunately, I don't know how it is in other countries. But if you would like me to look into it, I would love to look into it and maybe come back. But it is a little different, I'm sure.
That's what I was thinking because I know here in Canada, it's province provided, so state, instead of the school, and I think it goes from any age. I have a family member that gets disability and she's taken care of, and she's in her 30s now and she still gets assistance. I know one of my friends, her daughter was in speech therapy, which was recommended by their doctor, and I believe that it was subsidized, if I remember correctly. So she pays a small portion, if I understand. And their child is about 4 or 5 years old. So it seems similar, in a lot of ways between Canada and the United States, but Canada and the United States are similar in a lot of ways. And I'm glad that there's resources out there because as you mentioned, there's a lot of parents who may not even know that there's assistance out there outside of their own household. In your mom's group, I'm guessing, and correct me if I'm wrong, that there's probably different people from different parts of the United States. Is that correct?
It is. It is.
Yeah.
There's quite a few. Oh, we have it from all over. I even have Brazilians because I'm from Brazil. I grew up there. And so I have quite a few Brazilians in there. And moms from the community from TBR1, which is what the genetic disorder that my son has. I have I have one from England right now. I have a couple from Brazil, and the programs are different. But let me tell you, the things that we need to do for our children are not different. It does not matter where you are in the world. You're still going to advocate for your child the same way that you would in the United States, in Canada, in Montana, in California, wherever you are, you will have to advocate for them. And that is the whole program that I kind of talk through with my moms is I call it Thrive. And it goes through the process of finding a medical team, taking care of yourself, finding those resources that you need from the school district, from the state programs, from the insurance companies. Then going into, making sure that you are well, celebrating, making sure that you're taking the time to celebrate those small moments. And, and it goes on. But all of these things for you to survive and be an advocate for your child, the best way that you can, you have to do all these things that we talk about in my community.
Yeah, because as you mentioned, the resources that's provided from the country could be different across the board, but the dedication and the desire has to be the same. You have to be willing to put in the work to be there for your child. And I love that you teach that because sometimes some people, human nature, they can compare, right? There's, what where Michelle is, her state gives her this, but where I am, I don't get this. But as you mentioned, you're showing up, that person's showing up, we all have to show up together. Showing up may look differently, person to person, state to state, country to country, but it still doesn't mean that you don't show up. So as we close, Michelle, what's some advice that you want to give to the moms out there who are starting this journey? You've been through it, and they're like, okay, Michelle, give me the top two things that you think I should know as I start this journey with my child. If you want to make it top five, you can, but top two seems to be good.
I'm going to give you top three because these are the most important to me. Okay. One is know that you're not alone. You are not alone. Number two, if you're not well, your child's not going to be well. Take care of yourself. And number three, celebrate every single moment that you can with your child. Anything that they do well, anything that is new to them, celebrate with all your heart. Those are my top three.